Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Have you ever seen a ghost before? I can't say if ghosts are a thing, but I thought about it. The concept of a ghost is that it's a manifestation of a person who has passed. Normally, you wouldn't be able to communicate with one in any way, obviously. They have no corporeal body with which to talk, touch, and their minds likely work differently without a brain. Their memories are probably kaleidoscopic, zoetropic, or play over, etc. Considering this, it's not hard to imagine that a ghost wouldn't realize they were wandering an old building being stuck in a memory loop. They probably even see things a bit more abstract, like not even noticing walls they go through. I believe that a ghost is probably a physical being, just to a much lesser extent than us. This is how they pass through things. Basically, they are like fine sand that can pass through filters, while we are more like large material. Being made of so little also means they can only influence things around them and leave their impressions on the world. If you were to try catching a ghost on video or picture, you would never be able to get the real thing. Only the impressions of the ghost on the world, left with the small remainder of being it has. Like pressing your hand on styrofoam. I've had a thought that maybe we are like ghosts. People talk about higher dimensions and the beings that live in them. If ghosts were physical, but can pass through walls due to the lesser extent of it, where would that put us? I'm sure we aren't the most solid thing in the cosmos. Maybe beings from other dimensions see us as apparitions. We aren't capable of interacting with material existing on higher planes. These are just thoughts and theories. If you have any, I'd be interested in reading.
When I lived with my brother in a small town called Lytton Springs, we were really big into four-wheelers. I had a Yamaha Blaster, and Greg, my sister-in-law's brother, had one of those Honda four-wheel drive utility quads. It was really nice. Anyway, we would go out every night after school and go riding down all the long empty roads that seemed to go nowhere. There wasn't much out there but land used for cattle and whatnot. Lytton Springs was a small community of houses, a church with a large graveyard adjacent to it, and a small locally owned old country store. The place was called Les Spradling's General Store. It was built entirely out of wood and had an old cast iron oven that they used to heat the place. A few years prior, the founder and owner was shot dead behind the counter. Being that it was a small town where everyone knew each other, this was a big deal. Les was a great guy. He used to give us free sodas for coming by to talk to him and helping him out around the store. Les had built the store himself from the ground up and was a great friend to the majority of the people in the area. The night he was murdered, a drunk had stumbled into the store, and as he went to pay for his alcohol, he pulled out a gun and ordered Les to empty the register. Les gave him the money, and being a generous and friendly man, had told him he could always come to him if he needed someone to lend him some money for whatever reason. The man pulled out a gun upon receiving the cash and shot Les in the chest and left him to bleed to death, all alone in the store he had built to support his family. Since he died, everyone assumed that the store would be closed down, which meant all the ranchers and people in the area would have to make the long drive to the next town to get things they needed. This town pretty much depended on his store for gas, feed, food, etc. Things just weren't the same after he'd been killed, and some strange things started happening in the area. Greg and I would still ride our quads all over at night, riding with our lights off with nothing but the moon out to light the dark, lonely roads. We came across a lot of strange things, some that are hard to explain. Near our place, we found two abandoned graveyards. One was a Mexican graveyard. It had small faded statues of the Virgin Mary and crumbling graves with strange engravings on them. They didn't seem to be in Spanish like one would assume. When we discovered this place, we were excited. I mean, it's not every day you just discover something like this, especially when you know the area real well. It was tucked away on a small dirt path that led off through some brush on the side of the road quite a ways down. There was an old rickety fence made out of mesquite and barbed wire. It had a strange smell to it I can't really describe. The air felt musty and cold. Usually when it's cold, the air is crisp. We were walking through the graveyard, looking around, trying to read the tombstone and looking at the dates, all of which were dated from the late 1700s to mid-1800s. There were a total of about 20 tombstones, one of which was separated from the rest with a 3-foot-high stone barrier surrounding it. All the rocks had been stacked around it, and there was a faded hue of black paint on the top section of the rocks. They appeared to be limestone chunks, probably gathered from the local area back then, completely natural. In no way were they cut or shaped. The tombstone inside of this barrier was an old Spanish cross. The startling part of all this was a snake twisting in and out of the gaps in the tombstone. I don't know what kind of snake it was. It didn't look indigenous to the area. We mostly have rattlesnakes, copperheads, water moccasins, and garter snakes. This one, however, looked like any of those. It appeared to be 4 or 5 feet long, about 5 inches in diameter, but it was hard to tell with it twisting around the way it was. I have never seen a snake do anything like this before. It was like it was defending the tombstone and was completely oblivious to our presence there. The only thing I can think it might have been doing was trying to shed, but its scales weren't flaky and showed no signs of molting. It was a glossy pitch black, had a viper's head with the big puffy cheeks, probably heat pits, and its belly was also the same glossy black as its scales. After watching it swirl around this tombstone for a few minutes, we decided to see if we could scare it off. We grabbed a fallen branch and reached out to poke at it. It was completely unresponsive, no signs of aggression, or even trying to avoid the branch. It just kept swirling around the tombstone like that was its sole purpose in life. We gave up messing with the snake and decided to get going. That was all that happened that day. On another night, when the moon wasn't out and it was almost pitch black outside, we were out having fun following cars with our lights off, then getting up real close and turning them on suddenly to mess with people. It was fun in a bored redneck sort of way. We had a few people try and chase us after doing this, which made it even more fun. After about 12 a.m., you have maybe a 5% chance of seeing a car go by, so we rode into Lytton Springs to see if we could find any other people driving around. We were riding around Les Spradling's store and around the church and graveyard, just looking around. It was the first time we had actually taken the time to look around the small town. There was a water tower and a ton of enormous oak trees that had to have been hundreds of years old. There was also this giant gazebo-looking thing in this clearing of land. It was made entirely of wood, had dirt floors, a small stage, some stalls, chairs, and things. The people in the area called it the Tabernacle. It was where my brother got married. We started circling the graveyard, admiring how large some of the tombstones were, and even though we felt a strange feeling of guilt, we decided to see how exciting it would be to creep through the gate and walk around the graveyard at night. The place was huge, but nothing strange happened until we left. We were going down the road behind the church. We could see the back door to the church and the small volleyball court behind it. We slowed down to look back at the graveyard when I noticed the back door to the church starting to open. A woman in a sickly white dress peered through the darkness at us. She just stood there. We were pretty sure we weren't just seeing things. They lock that place up every night, and I doubt anyone would sleep over. We started to talk about who it might be, and when we looked back to get a better look, she was gone, but the door was still open. This kind of creeped us out, so we started to drive off to go back home. When we got to the 4-way crossing there, she was again standing in the middle of the road, arms dangling at her side. She seemed to glow just a little bit and was very sickly looking. With an expression of devastation, she scared the crap out of us, so we went full throttle and sped right past her. I didn't notice any change in temperature or smell, but then again I was going 60 miles per hour and had the wind blowing against me. We trucked it about 5 miles back to the house and never saw her again. But it makes for a good story.
My brother and I once rented this old house in the Bay Area, along one of the main thoroughfares into the aforementioned area. The house was super old, and prior to moving in, when we went to check it out, there were all these religious candles, figurines, etc. in one of the garages, but we didn't think anything of it. After we'd moved in, this dude from a few houses down came to introduce himself. He said he and his buddies used to drink in the backyard while it was vacant, and mentioned the aforementioned figurines having been all set around the well that was under the carport in the backyard, and supposedly a girl by the name of Anime Spinner had fallen into the well and died, and she was who the stuff was dedicate to, as along with all the stuff, there was once an obituary for her. stuck to a nail on the well as well. After hearing this story and getting spooked, we went back over to the well to check it out. And sure enough, there was a rusted, weathered little girl's bracelet hanging from a nail on the well. I asked my grandmother about it as her family used to own some farmland in that area, and she made it sound like back in the day people fell in wells all the time. I never saw a ghost myself, but a number of our buddies who would come by and trip on psychedelics without knowing the backstory would get the fear and talk about a presence in the house. Spooky stuff.
When I was a child, we lived in a most unusual haunted house. Built on the log cabin style but larger, more like the Ponderosa, the house was at least 100 years old. The upstairs and downstairs had been converted into separate apartments. We lived downstairs while an elderly lady, Miss O'Kelly, lived upstairs. The house was situated on the outskirts of Atlanta on several acres, nestled away from the main roads where traffic flowed. Although electricity, running water, and other modern conveniences had been added, even as a toddler I recognized the vestiges of a bygone era. Rusty plows and other farm implements lay idle on overgrown fields. Ashen sheds, barns, and other outbuildings still housed the remnants of harnesses, plows, pitchforks, and other tools for farming, hunting, and trapping. What remained of the flexible two-handled saws they used were only the half-eaten blades that time had devoured. Broken cast-iron pots and shards of pottery lay half-buried under the earth alongside the large lye vat which had been used for making soap. A dirt lane meandered around the premises into the woods where small, dilapidated houses stood crumbling. Only one was occupied by a strange man, a bit of a recluse, as was Miss O'Kelly, disappearing into the medley of strange sounds and people that was the backdrop of an already haunted world I had been born into. In my youth, I never understood they were ghosts, not real people like Miss O'Kelly or the man that lived in the woods. Let me explain. It was not a case where only one specially sensitive individual or clairaudient could hear the sounds. Everyone heard them. Our ghosts were toilets that worked from sunup to sundown. The matriarch of the family that we dubbed Granny was not that old by today's standards, judging from her labor. She was the first and the last to rise and go to bed, playing out the same drama endlessly that began with the morning wake-up call. Granny ascended the stairs, clapped her hands and barked at the men, presumably her sons and husband. "Get up! Get up!" Most of what they said sounded like gibberish, and the accent was strange. The thud of feet could be heard hitting the floor as well as their descent down the stairs. Granny could be heard in the kitchen clacking the dishes and silverware as she prepared the morning meal. The men always exited through the side door in the kitchen to harness the snorting horses with chains to continue plowing the fields. Other sounds emanated from the house, the thump-thumping of Granny churning butter in the kitchen, and later, the rhythmic foot-tapping on the floor of what we imagined to be a spinning wheel. Though no one ever saw a visual manifestation, to my knowledge, they had very definite roles that were easily recognized. The buckboard wagons creaked as the wheels turned and drowned out with distance, later returning with louder sounds as they approached the house. Throughout the day, the sounds of hammering, sewing, and other work-related noises could be heard. Upon entering a room, the noise would suddenly stop only to start back up again the minute you left. If you entered their work area outside, the noises would also cease temporarily, only to resume as soon as you left. For that reason, I assumed they were real people that were just around the corner, in another room outside or on or about the premises working. At about this time, my grandmother became seriously ill, and we began spending weekends away from home. Upon returning, Ms. O'Kelly said there was a whole gang of them downstairs just jibber-jabbering away. Our household ghosts had company with all the noises associated with a get-together of family and friends. No one could understand them, except for the morning wake-up call of "Get up, get up." That was close enough to "Get up, get up." And with the accompanying sounds, there was no mistaking those words. Ms. O'Kelly said when we weren't there, they'd carry on all night, and she didn't think she'd ever get any sleep and was always glad when we came back. I asked my mother what she did when we first moved in, and discovered the place was haunted, to which she calmly replied, "Oh, we knew it was haunted when we moved in. The Wilsons had lived there before us, and they told us about it. But they said the ghosts wouldn't hurt you." Her only complaint had been that she thought she'd never get any sleep amidst the incessant noises that would often go on all night. Other strange events she recalled, one that I vaguely recall, were the lanterns that floated through the woods at night at about the same level they would be if a human held them. She didn't know what to make of the events at the time, but in later years my family and I had many discussions regarding the ghostly manifestations. My mother and I decided to go in search of the haunted scape after some 40 years. As we were driving there, I asked her if she thought they were still there, to which she said, "Oh no. You know, as soon as they tore the house down, they all left." Interestingly, though I had been a child when I last lived there, as we neared the locale, I felt it and exclaimed to my mother, "We're close. I can feel it." She responded, "So can I." Though a mall and newer homes had been constructed at the site, some of the energy remained. We heard nothing, nor did we see anything out of the ordinary. But there at Ground Zero, we could still feel their presence.
Yes. I'd frequently go to Bachelor's Grove Cemetery in the middle of the night when I was younger, which is considered the most haunted cemetery in the US. It's in the middle of the woods, and basically the majority of the graves have been dug up and robbed by Satanists. Animals are commonly found sacrificed there, gravestones, dug into the forest, etc. You can feel the angry energy when you're in there. To give a bit of background, the most common and famous spirit there is this giant 7-foot-tall entity. I forgot what people called him since this is like 2010. It was the Night Watchman or something. He's been known to walk around in the woods around the cemetery during the day and chase people down the path leading to the cemetery at night. He's what people call a shadow spirit, meaning it looks like he's made of opaque cloud-like darkness that doesn't reflect any light. So one time I went there at 1 a.m. or so with some friends to take some pics, and after seeing not much went home and went to sleep a couple hours after. 45 minutes or so after I woke up to drink some water or use the restroom, something like that. And there it was, standing a foot away from me. I was sleeping on a couch in my room, and it was maybe where my knees were, standing completely still and just staring right at me. It all happened so fast. The only thing I remember clearly was how big it was, and it looked like it was made out of complete darkness. There was dark fog evaporating off of it, like if someone was in a sauna and then stepped outside into 15-degree weather. I jumped back so hard I gave myself a light concussion on the wall, and I quickly wiped my eyes. Once I finished wiping them and opened my eyes, it was completely gone. Scariest thing that ever happened to me in my life. I am not a Satanist or anything like that. I grew up Catholic. I only went to this place because I was curious if ghost spirits were actually real, and the implications of that upon reality. Looking back now in my mid-30s, I wonder if that spirit was there to harm me, or just to show in a very direct, frightening way that yes, we are real. I was always respectful there, and never did anything directly to cause anything to get upset at me.
I lived in a trailer with my dad after my parents divorced. One night, as I was making dinner, I heard a knock at the door, and when I looked out, there was no one there. It kept happening all night long. I just ignored it. I thought that maybe it was some sort of echoing since the trailers were so close together. The next following months were okay. Nothing really happened. After I graduated high school, things started getting strange. While taking a shower, I could hear what sounded like stomping. And my dad was rarely there, always working, I guess. In the second bathroom, there would always be a smell, like rotten eggs or something. The back room, where I slept, would always have a chill. It was even cold in the summertime. I started sleeping in the living room, and night after night a pair of headlights would always illuminate the room. There were never any headlights, because as soon as it would happen, I always peeked out the window and it was always pitch dark. Things never seemed to work right. The television would turn on and off. The heater would turn on in the summer. The shower would always turn on and off. Everything would end up in the weirdest places. The salt shaker would end up in the bathroom. Canned food would be on top of the fridge. There were always flies in the house. I mean, just everything was always missing. I reconciled with my mom and ended up going back to live with her. About a month later, my older brother separated from his wife, like father, like son, so he stayed with my dad, and it was easy for them because they both worked together. I visited my dad and brother quite often, and my brother started telling me things that were happening. Of course, I related and told him that even though it was spooky, nothing bad ever really happened. Exactly. 1 week later, my brother moved out and didn't give any real explanation to my dad. He ended up telling me that he was there one night alone and his wife was going to come over and talk about the marriage. He said that someone kept calling on the home phone, but nothing showed on the caller ID. There was whispering and static noises. He said that he could kind of hear a man and woman arguing, and that each time he could hear the woman say, "You don't even love me." He said that's what she would say over and over again, barely above a whisper. As soon as his wife got there, it stopped. He said that when she came in the trailer, she felt like she couldn't breathe, and that she felt this sense of sadness. He just ended up leaving because he said that it scared him. I think the phone ringing was what made him really leave. My dad ended up moving in with his new girlfriend, and one night we were all out. Myself, my brother, his wife, my dad's girlfriend. Well, we started talking about the trailer and how creepy it was. Mind you, we never told my dad about what we heard or saw. He told us that one night after we were all gone, he was asleep on his bed, which was directly on the floor, and he felt like someone was choking him. He woke up and just thought that maybe he was dreaming. He went back to sleep, and he said that something was pulling at his arms and legs, pulling him into 2 different directions. He turned on a small lamp and said that he could see someone's reflection in the window, that it was a man with a baseball hat on. When he tried to get up, it vanished. He said that maybe it was a dream, but it didn't explain why his arms and legs were hurting. My dad called me before he finalized the move out and had me come get some figurines that I had left in the back bathroom. I didn't know what he was talking about, so I went over there and went to the back bathroom, and before I could really make it there, I heard glass smashing. It was the figurines. They all were thrown to the ground, but the weird thing is, those were not there when I packed up, and no one knew where they came from. We also found a shoebox full of old pictures, and inside we found a few pictures of the man that my dad saw. To this day, we still have those pictures. It's like we can't seem to throw them out. The landlord said he didn't know who the previous owners were to that trailer. He bought it at an auction.
I've been waiting until I saw the next Greentext thread to share my story. Be me, some many years ago. Learn about a superstition regarding furniture, specifically chairs. If you leave chairs out, desk chairs, dining chairs, any chair that is normally stored away when not in use, you will invite ghosts to use them while you sleep. Not superstitious, but often repeat it to others as reasoning for being pedantic about putting things away. Be me, about 2 weeks ago. In bed, about to sleep, I noticed I left the computer chair slightly out from the desk and slightly sideways. Too cozy, I'm not getting out of bed just to go along with a superstition I don't believe in. Sleep. Wake up, eyes closed, feel a presence. Open eyes, impossibly skinny figure is sitting on my chair, facing mostly away from me. Incredibly long black hair, overly long arms, overly long nails. Overly long everything, really. Possibly feminine, if I had to give it a gender. Give my eyes time to adjust, blink and shake my head, just in case it's a waking hallucination, as I get those sometimes. Still here, I've always said if a ghost messed with me, I'd try to fight it, swing myself out of bed, ready to launch myself at it. Wake up again, feeling presence. Again. Figure is still there, facing away from me. Sit up, try to ask it what it wants. Wake up a 3rd time to the feeling of a spindly hand gently pressing me down for a moment. Keep my eyes closed. A vision briefly appears in my mind of the figure, still sitting in the chair, turning the smallest amount possible so it can watch me from the corner of its eye. Get the feeling that this is what it wants, specifically to watch me sleep. Keep my eyes closed and fall asleep eventually, sometime later. Wake up in the morning, fine, except for the loss of sleep and renewed conviction towards storing chairs away correctly.
The face when I keep having slightly spoopy incidents. Nothing remotely scary, just random happenings. I already talk aloud to myself quite frequently. Sometimes I feel like I can hear a reply at times. Just act autistic as usual. Hope the maybe ghosts find it funny. Can feel random drafts across the top of my head as if the wind has a hand and it's patting my head. Okay, lol. Half the time I see white wispy things out of the corner of my eyes. They don't go away even when I clean my eyes. Sometimes I blink and they're all I can see for half an instant. Okay, funny ghost, you do you. On some nights I randomly get loud, high-pitched noises in my left ear and it leaves it ringing for half an hour, as if someone came up to me with a megaphone and screeched directly into my ear, "Well, screw you too." And more recently, the cat died not that long ago. Not even a week passes, and I can feel something sitting on me when I'm in bed. Where he died was on my bed as I tried have him be comfortable as he was going, and he loved to sleep on it. Check each time with a light, but nothing is on me. I can still feel the weight when checking. This goes on for a few more months until I feel it get lifted off me as if someone else is picking them up. The feeling of this is permanently etched into my brain, since my cat loved to sit on me so much that I'd need help since I didn't want to be mean to him. I swear he's the one that's still randomly opening the doors in my house, even when there's zero chance it should be able to happen. I still miss the bastard.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.